Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. It is UAB week for the Tennessee football team. The Vols getting ready to take on the Blazers on Saturday at Neyland Stadium. Been a few days since our last podcast. Hope you're doing well. And it's been a tough week, I know, for Tennessee fans coming off the overtime loss to Georgia on Saturday. We're going to talk about that, reflect on a little bit more of what we've gathered about the game from kind of reviewing things this week, and also touch on the latest news on the Vols, and look ahead to Saturday's game against UAB, and take some of your questions from our mailbag in this week's edition of the podcast. I'm joined by Patrick Brown on this edition. Patrick, hope you're doing well. How's your week been so far?
It's been pretty good as I find the unmute button. Yeah, it's been pretty good. A little bit lower key than last week. Obviously, Tennessee fans are probably still lingering a little bit on the Georgia loss. I don't blame anyone for doing it. It was a tough one. A lot of plays you can go over in your head and wonder what if, and or maybe some fans have been able to just sort of, I don't want to think about it anymore. So, but for the team, you're kind of moving on. It's a new week. I wouldn't say it's the same for us, but we have a weekly, I guess, routine that we try to go through as well. So it's been good. Weather's been great, and looking forward to another chance to be in Neyland Stadium on Saturday, because I was thinking about this the other day. Like, they have, I think, one home game the next 5 weeks, something like that. So, this is their, they have this one on Saturday against UAB, then they play Arkansas, and then it's, there's a lot of 3 road games and an open date in there between some of these home games. So they get 3 in November. And so this last one is the last time we get a chance to be in Neyland for a while. So I know everybody's like, it's UAB, they're not very good, but you only get so many games. You only get guaranteed a few of them. So the ones that come, you got to make sure you make the most of them.
It goes so fast. I'm reminded of that every year. I mean, we're already a quarter of the way through the season. After Saturday, it'll be 1/3 of the way through the season. So football season is a blur, and you've got to enjoy each one. Each game's a little different too. Even a game like UAB, there's some things to take away from it, and things you get to learn about the team. So you got to enjoy the journey for what it is, and remind yourself there's only so many of these that you get to enjoy during football season, and it's over in the blink of an eye. So. With that being said, Patrick, we've had a few days to kind of digest what happened in the Georgia game, go back and watch the replay a little bit, break down the film as you do every week, and the X's and O's features that are outstanding. If you're not already a GoVols247 subscriber, you should be for that feature alone, if nothing else. But yeah, I mean, we've had plenty of time to go back and assess what went wrong, what went right for the Vols, which there was plenty that went right. But what's I guess any additional takeaways? We talked in our post-game podcast, obviously Saturday, but what since then have you maybe gathered or picked up on about the game that we maybe didn't cover initially in the few hours after the game?
Yeah, I think 2 things sort of stand out. I'll start with the offense, and that's just sort of the continued evolution. Kelsey Pope, Tennessee's wide receivers coach, who's I guess some people had some questions about him during the offseason, but he has answered them pretty strongly with the way he's recruited and the way his guys are playing right now. That position group has quickly gone from a huge offseason concern. I know it was probably my biggest unknown, to what appears to be a strength with the way that Chris Brazzell, Mike Matthews, and Braylon Stalin are all playing. They're not making every play, but I'm sure there's a play or two that they would want back. But just the way he talked about how coming out of the Ohio State game last season, how the staff determined that they needed to evolve on offense, and he admitted that part of that was some of the there was some player put in there too, and I'm always, I don't want to say reminded, Butch Jones made one of his big mistakes, I think, was maybe listening to his players too much about his strength coach situation. So coaches don't want to always be, you've got to run your program how you see fit. But Kelsey Pope kind of mentioned that some of the receivers wanted more a more variety of routes and concepts and things like that in the offense, and you're seeing that. You're seeing a lot of bunch formations. Tennessee had Georgia in a blender at times in that game with what they were throwing at them, in terms of route concepts and how they were sending guys one way, bringing one guy back against the grain and creating openings that way. And I think, the takeaway from the first 3 games is Tennessee is still scheming guys open, which I think they've done a really good job of really throughout the entire Josh Heupel tenure. And now they're doing it a different way. And you saw it be wildly successful against Tennessee. So as he sort of touched on, credit to the staff for realizing that they needed to change, implementing those changes, and credit to the players too for being able to, I don't want to say learn a new offense, but that's also some of the words that we heard them sort of offhand say during the course of the offseason. The other situation, and I'll let you get your thoughts before I shift to the defense. But we've talked so much. There's been so much talk about that sequence right after the Joshua Joseph strip sack. You're up 5. You got a chance to go there and deliver the kill shot. And Josh Heupel's, I think, taken some criticism by not being more aggressive there. And I do think that he should have put the ball in the hands of his quarterback because Joey Aguilar had sort of gotten hot again at that point. But you look at those 3 run plays, and I think Georgia was guarding against the shot play. I think Heupel mentioned that after the game. They were playing with 2 high safeties. So you look at those 3 run plays, and if those plays are executed, even if just one of them is executed, I think that sequence could turn out entirely differently. Just some missed blocks. They didn't handle some things well. On the first play, they've got a chance to get Deshaun Bishop to the second level. And if, I'm not a screenshot guy, but if you freeze it at one point, the next guy you see behind the line of scrimmage with everybody blocked pretty much is the umpire, who's about 9 yards downfield. And that was 1st and 15. You can get a nice gain there. Instead, Miles Kitzman sort of misses a block on the edge. Bishop gets tripped up and only gets a couple yards. The second down play, they've got a chance to pull. They pulled 2 guys on the left side, Lance Hurd, Sham Umarov. But Georgia sets the edge pretty well against Kitzelman, and it sort of, gets the play sort of muddied up there. And Bishop, instead of trying to stick with it and bouncing it, which is where it was designed to go outside, he sort of cuts it up to where the traffic is. Doesn't work out. You're in 3rd and long now. And on that play, I think Georgia blitzed both its linebackers. And if Sham Umarov gets a better block on that 3rd down, Bishop's got a chance, if he sees maybe the seam to his right, to maybe make a safety miss and get the first down, or even get close enough to, as Josh Heupel alluded to after the game, close enough to maybe go for it on 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 or something like that. So, it's kind of that's been such a pivotal moment in the sequence of the game that it's been rehashed, and there's been criticism there. And I'm not saying it's not unfair, but it also is an execution deal where Tennessee, if they execute one of those plays better, maybe that sequence turns out right, maybe you win the game. But that's just kind of how this, going back through and watching this game again, I think it had to be frustrating for the coaches and players that they let that one get away.
Yeah, one other thought just to add to what you said. I've been asked about, of course, a few different what ifs. Those late game scenarios, especially that fans have kind of relived. And I think one that's been talked about some, but maybe not as much as the others. Should Tennessee have gone for 2 up 34-30 on that touchdown? I think that's one of the things you can.
I would have.
Yeah, they should have. I think that was a mistake in the game that Tennessee maybe didn't go for 2 there, and that the charts would tell you, I think, to go for 2 in that situation in the 4th quarter, certainly, because then you can go up by 6. That could be 2 field goals. It also gives you a chance to still save the tie if you give up a touchdown that way. So there's multiple reasons going for 2 there makes sense. So of all the things, people have been, obviously talking about why didn't Tennessee try to push the ball down the field more when they got the ball back on the turnover? Why didn't they try to get closer for the field goal? Why didn't they kick it sooner? Whatever. All those different scenarios. That's the one that I kind of come back to and decide, that one, it's hard to, I mean, it didn't look like a big deal at the time, but it ended up being a very big deal. And if you're up 39-30 instead of 38-30, and Georgia doesn't have the chance to go for 2 to tie the game, that changes things completely on that final drive for Georgia when they're going for it on 4th and 6. Maybe they kick the field goal there even, and so that totally changes that game. And who knows what happens down the stretch? But that's just one that I've kind of come back to, and that's the one that I can't help but think, what if Tennessee, maybe they don't get the 2-point conversion? It's just a 7-point game and nothing really changed, but that's at least a missed opportunity, I think, that you have to acknowledge in looking back at that game. On the defensive side, Patrick, they obviously gave up a lot in the passing game in that matchup with Georgia. Good day for Gunnar Stockton. He hit a lot of plays against man coverage, certainly, and then Tennessee struggled slowing down the run game at times, and then obviously had to play a shorter rotation on the defensive line because of all the injuries. What did you make of the defensive performance when you went back and looked at it a little more in depth?
Yeah, I want to go back to the 2-point conversion just real quick. I think in the NFL, that's an automatic go for it, because the NFL, the extra points aren't as much of an automatic as they used to be.
Right.
So the chance to go up 6, the number one thinking there would be to at least make them kick the extra point. And if you went for it and you had a really good play, you felt like that would get it, that also could change how you manage that spot after the turnover. So, of course, we're all doing this in hindsight, so it's easy to always second guess. But, defensively, I think there were some plays that you're just like, I mean, don't want to say Gunnar Stockton played out of his mind. We just haven't seen him make some of the plays that he made in this game. There's a play in the third down. I think it was before the strip sack where Dominic Bailey beats the guard. Jordan Ross trucks the tackle. And Dominic Bailey just crushes Stockton. But as he throws it, he hits a guy in stride. Pretty good throw. Got it past the linebacker. The receiver had one at the top of the route and was open, but still, I mean, 8 times out of 10, how many times out of 10 is that throw behind him? Is that throw in the dirt? That was just a great throw. And then there's obviously the fourth down throw too. There were also just some calls that and again, we're all doing this in hindsight, and this isn't like an indictment on Tim Banks. His defense was awesome last season, and he was deservedly rewarded with a big contract extension and raise this offseason. But some of the safety blitzes they brought just were not effective. They were too late. They were easily picked up. And on the fourth down play, something I did break this down a little bit and added what Kirby Smart said after the game is that Georgia was going to take a shot there. In Tennessee, it looked like was maybe playing man, but they were also playing the sticks more. I think they dropped Nathan Robinson in coverage and sort of a zone, sort of a combination coverage there. And they had a few guys around the middle of the field guarding the sticks, whereas I think Georgia kept the tight end and the running back to block. So they were taking a shot there. Kirby Smart said after the game that throughout that entire drive, he was on the headset saying to Mike Bobo, their offensive coordinator, hey, we need to score quickly because they might not get to 2. So they needed to save themselves time to get the football back if they needed to. So, just little things like that. And then, on the 2-point conversion, you can see Idris Farouk. He's making sort of this kind of motion with his hands. If you're listening, you can't really see it, but he saw the play. It was the play that the Chiefs ran in the Super Bowl a few years ago with Kadarius Toney that did it win in the game, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And every time I've seen it run since then, it's never covered. I think Farouk mentioned, recognized it, that it was coming, but he's making the motion. He's trying to get Colton Hood's attention, but Hood either just didn't see it or didn't hear him. Maybe it just didn't register, but he gets caught too far inside. It's an easy conversion. That's another play where, if you get that stop there, you can, manage the game differently. Whereas you get to the end, Tennessee could run out the clock with, again, you're assuming that if one thing happens differently and everything else happens the same, it goes a certain way. But it's just, I don't think Tennessee played a great game defensively. And I know that's something that we were talking about earlier this week when we were on campus. They just, some missed tackles here and there, some calls that just didn't come off, even some calls that, looked good. There were a couple plays in the first half that I broke down where, they have a free blitzer, but the ball just gets out quickly. Georgia caught him in a blitz a few times with screen passes, whether it was, a quick flip to the running back or some of those perimeter plays. There's a play on the tying drive on 3rd and 7 where, they bring somebody off, from the boundary. I think it was Farouk over the slot, and Arion Carter is bailing into coverage, and he gets out there in position to sort of make a play on the receiver on a screen. But he would, Arion would say, yeah, I got to make that tackle, but it's also a tough play because he's going out there full speed thinking I got to cover. And the receiver is able to kind of use his leverage against him and get around him. So I don't think that was their best game defensively. It felt like that in the moment. When you go and break it down, you're just like, man, if they could have done 1 3rd down differently, 1 4th down differently, then things turn out differently. So that and I asked Miles Kitzman about this on Monday. It's like, obviously in the moment after the game, it sucks. You're mad, you're frustrated that you let it go, but then you have to go back and watch it on Monday. And you can just see even more in more detail how close you were. And that has to be frustrating for Tennessee.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. And one thing you mentioned on Tim Banks, that if I had a critique of Tim Banks, and it's hard to knock the job he has done at Tennessee, and he's in his 5th year, and Tennessee's defense progressively got better through his first 4 years. Now this year it looks like they might take a step back overall, but we'll see what they look like the rest of the season. But injuries have clearly played a role in Tennessee's decline so far this year on defense. So who knows at full strength what they would look like, but you're missing your 2 starting cornerbacks, including one who's an All-SEC, All-America candidate. And then you've got a couple defensive linemen that are essentially starters or starter level players in Jackson Moy and David Hobbs that are out. So you can't fault Tim Banks for much with all those guys out. But last year this was a problem against Georgia, and you touched on it there, that too many ineffective blitzes, whether it's not being imaginative enough, not executing them well enough, whatever it is, it seems too often that when Tennessee blitzes, and they didn't have this problem against Syracuse, to be fair. I thought they had some very nice, well-timed blitzes, some delayed blitzes and things like that got to the quarterback. Against Georgia especially, it seems like they have trouble getting their blitzes home when they are trying to bring pressure and from different places too. So that would be one critique that seems to, maybe there's some room for Tennessee to grow in its defensive package, or at least improve in that area. And then, I was reminded of this going back and watching the game, just how quickly things changed for Tennessee's offense in the second quarter. Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann and that staff, what they do so well, better than so many other staffs in the SEC, they make in-game adjustments. They don't seem to wait for halftime. And I think they made some tweaks there in the second quarter, playing more zone, things like that caused Tennessee some problems. And that when you go back and look at it, that may have been what won Georgia the game as much as anything, is that they caused some problems for Tennessee's offense in the second quarter. And they were kind of searching until the middle of the third quarter when they got the offense going again. And if Georgia had to wait till halftime to figure things out, that's a different ballgame. So give Georgia credit for finding a way to slow things down there when Tennessee came out just on absolute fire in the first quarter, and especially Joey Aguilar. With that being said, Patrick, injuries have been kind of the big storyline this week. A couple that we've talked about with Josh Heupel in particular this week. David Sanders Jr., where Heupel talked a good bit about that during his Monday press conference, touched on it again Wednesday on the SEC coaches teleconference. And then he did admit Wednesday on the SEC teleconference that Radarious Jackson, the freshman wide receiver, is out for at least this week's game. He did not go in depth on exactly how long he will be out, but he is out for this week. What do you make of those injury updates, Patrick? And what should we be thinking at this point about the David Sanders situation?
I think Heupel was trying to provide clarity, but it still is clear as mud.
Yeah.
I appreciate the head coach for being a little bit more open about it. But it's also like, it's still just kind of a murky situation. Even behind the scenes, we hear stuff and it's like, what, like, huh? Like what? Like, it's just kind of a weird situation, a unique situation where it was Heupel's words. And I think that's fair. So again, we'll just have to see. He was asked if he was going to play on Saturday and said, I don't know. We'll see. Not the rosiest. I do think Sanders is, he's been involved in practice and stuff. I don't know that he's practicing, but I do think he's out there. I don't think he's losing conditioning, where if he was to get cleared at any, I guess, point to what Heupel said, that he could be cleared any day. I don't think he would need like some time to, get his conditioning back. So I do think he's keeping that part going while he's not necessarily fully practicing. Jackson, I think, will probably miss more than just this next game. And it's tough that he's going to miss this game, because this obviously would be an opportunity for him to get more playing time, potentially earn more playing time down the road. So that'll shorten that rotation that isn't really rotation a little bit. That was another one of those plays you kind of touched on where the defender made a good job seeing that crossing route coming and making a play. There were a couple of those where Georgia was able to crack down on those drag routes that hurt them early in the game. But
that's a freshman running right into a zone where a veteran maybe sits in the zone a little bit. He seemed to run right into it.
Well, Travis Smith did the same thing and got the same kind of hit, but didn't have this, the same injury. So we'll see if Jackson, how long he's out for. And Heupel on the teleconference on Wednesday was like, you guys can see the availability report. And I think as he's saying it, he's remembering that it's not an SEC game this week, so there isn't one. Yeah. But I would not expect Jackson to. I would think he would be available next week either. But and we'll see about Sanders. We'll see about Hobbs. I don't think you would play Moy or Hobbs in this game necessarily. This would be, I think, a chance for you to try to play some more of those young guys. I think you need to get some of those young guys some more chances to play, if for no other reason than to give Dominic Bailey and Bryson Easton, have them not have to play 60-something snaps like they have in 2 or 3 games so far. So. Yeah. I would be surprised if you saw those guys. Is there anybody else that I'm misremembering?
Those are the main ones we know about right now. But yeah, Jackson being out, it shortens that receiver rotation. Even to your point about getting some of the young guys in at defensive tackle. How do you get the starters at wide receiver out of this game? You're gonna have a pretty short bench there. You're probably gonna see some Tommy Wenton and some guys like that playing at wide receiver late in this game if Tennessee takes care of business. So that does ding your depth a little bit, and we'll see how long Jackson is out. The Sanders situation, I'm not expecting him back super soon. I'll say that. I know it's been kind of framed as a day-to-day situation. I think that's there's some truth to that, but also not. So I'll be interested in seeing what happens in the long run. But I don't expect him back this week for sure. And then beyond that, we'll see. So it's a weird situation, as you said, but I think it's and on some level, it may be just sort of a pain tolerance thing. What is David Sanders able to endure and play with any effectiveness? And is it something that he'll have to address with some sort of surgery after the season or whenever they decide to deal with that? But it's not an ideal situation. That's certainly not what we envisioned for that offensive line. But they've played well despite not having David Sanders out there to this point, and they'll at least for this week probably need to continue to do that with Jesse Perry at right tackle and that sort of shifted around interior with Sham Umarov at left guard and Wendell Moya Jr. at right guard. Before we get to a break here, quickly, do want to touch on, got a lot of questions to get to as well. Want to touch on UAB, that just briefly, not a matchup we're obviously expecting to be a super close game for Tennessee. But Patrick, there are a couple things about UAB that are noteworthy. Obviously, a high-profile coach in Trent Dilfer, who is a former coach at Lipscomb Academy in Nashville, won a couple state championships there with Edwin Spillman and Caleb Beasley and others, and also just a guy that has an offensive background, and they've had a pretty decent offense at times at UAB. So a team maybe capable of putting up some points in this game, but on the other hand, a team that's really struggling defensively and probably going to have a hard time slowing down Tennessee, you would think.
Yeah, their first game was a 52-42 win against Alabama State, and they were down, I think, 28-17 in that game. They actually played Navy pretty close. Navy is in that conference, the American Conference. So UAB will get a lot of option football this year between playing Army, Navy, and Rice. So, and then they get to play Tennessee. So maybe that's why their defensive numbers are so bad. But yeah, they've had some juice on offense. They have, as you mentioned, Ryan, under Trent Dilfer, they've been able to score pretty well. Defensively, though, they're well in the hundreds and 120s.
131 in total defense. That is rough.
Yeah, Alabama State was 13-15 on third down in that game, which is so you put that into context. They've actually probably been better over the last couple of games. I think their defense actually won them the game. They played Akron, so not sure what that says about the strength of their team, but they didn't score in the second half, and their defense was able to hold that one and make a play at the end, I think, to preserve a 31-28 win. But they've got some juice on offense with some guys. Their quarterback is Jalen Kitna. That might sound like a familiar name. It's John Kitna's son. He started his career at Florida, had an off-field situation, led to his dismissal there. Not going to get into that. You guys can Google that if you want. I don't have all the facts, so I'm not going to speak on it. But they've got some receivers there that can make some plays. And it's interesting in this day and age of everybody's, so transfer laden. Some of their best players on offense, obviously Kitna's a Florida transfer, but Iverson Hooks is Corey Milliner. Their top two receivers are both homegrown guys. They brought in AJ Johnson from ETSU. And they've got a guy that's sort of a utility knife in Solomon Beebe. He returned a kickoff return for a touchdown last week. I think the opening kickoff. He's got already 18 rushes, 10 catches. So he's sort of a versatile guy that they will probably try to use in this game. And their running back is Javon Jackson. This is the most transfer portal era thing ever. But he is playing at Neyland Stadium for a third straight year for a third different team. Because he played at Austin P, and I think was a pretty good all-conference level player there. So he would have played Tennessee in 23. He transfers to UTEP with the Austin P coach. They played here last season. And so he plays for them there. And now he transfers to UAB, and they're, and I don't think he's the only one. I think there's some other guys that have maybe gone the Austin P, UTEP, and then somewhere else route. Maybe not for UAB, but maybe for New Mexico State. But that's the most transfer portal thing era thing ever. But defensively, yeah, they struggle on third down. They give up a lot of big plays. I think they've already given up 5 plays of 60+ yards. So the way Tennessee has been putting up big plays, that's not a great formula. They Dilfer overhauled the defensive staff, brought in Steve Russ, who was a longtime defensive coordinator for Troy Calhoun at Air Force, then went to the NFL for 6 years. So they rehauled that side. The defensive numbers aren't great, but I guess you could say they've been better over the last 2 games playing Navy, which is a tough matchup for anybody. And then, last week they play Akron and are able to get the defense to help win the game. But Tennessee should, as long as Tennessee is sharp, Tennessee should be able to name their score on offense. And the defensively, it's going to be about, they're going to get another chance to sort of work on the pass defense that has given up too many big plays and needs to tighten up some coverage things. Obviously, having played Syracuse and what Gunnar Stockton did to them last week, I don't think the pass defense numbers are very good. And this group will test it. Kitna's got NFL bloodlines, and Treadilfer made a good point this week in his press conference that for his guys, like this is if they want to play at the next level in the NFL, this is their game, because this is the first game that the scouts are going to turn on, and if they even want to get on a board, they have to perform well in this game. So Tennessee should expect UAB's best shot, and they need to be ready. It's a classic sort of hangover game. You're coming off a brutal loss. You got to turn the page. You're playing an early game. The stadium is going to be probably a few notches down. I never want to doubt Tennessee fans because they always deliver, but it's a 12:45 game against a non-conference opponent. It would be a chance to maybe sleepwalk through some things. I think Josh Heupel's teams have been pretty good in these moments, but they still need to go out there and be sharp and focus and execute and do all the things that they need to do to get this one over with. And this is their last chance. You kind of touched on this a little bit ago with Radarious Jackson, but this is kind of their last chance before SEC play to really get some to work on your depth, and they need to develop more depth, I think, across both sides of the football. So that's an important chance to do that in this game.
For sure. Tennessee will be wearing the all orange uniforms in this game. So orange pants will be out for the third consecutive home game before Tennessee goes away for a few weeks. We also have a story up. If you are going to the game, be sure to check out our story at GoVols247 with all the details on the new entry procedure for fans. They're doing their best to communicate that, but some changes made last week after there was just a mass of fans outside the gates trying to get into Neyland Stadium. So if you're going to the game, be aware of some of those changes they're making for this game to try to make for a smoother entry for all the fans getting in especially before a 12:45 kickoff, where so many people will be arriving shortly before kickoff for those types of games after their morning tailgates or midday arrivals on campus. With that being said, we got some questions to get to, and we'll get to those here in just a few minutes, or just a few moments, I should say, after this quick timeout on the GoVols247 podcast. Welcome back to the GoVols247 podcast. Patrick Brown joining me on this episode. I'm Ryan Callahan, and we've got plenty of your questions to get to from the checkerboard on GoVols247. As always, we appreciate our members there contributing the questions. And this week, let's face it, Tennessee not facing an SEC opponent. Great week for us to take some more questions. We said we would do that during ETSU week, and so we wanted to get back to that and give you guys a chance to throw your questions at us for this edition of the podcast. So with that being said, let's get right back to before we get right back to it, I should say, we need to remind you to please give us a rating and a review wherever you get your GoVols247 podcast. We would appreciate that. And also, if you are not already a member, please subscribe to GoVols247. Now, $1 for the first month to sign up right now at GoVols247.com. So help us out if you don't mind with a rating and review on this podcast, wherever you get your GoVols247 podcast, and join the site if you are not already a member of GoVols247, so you can send us questions like these that we're about to read from the checkerboard. Patrick, I'll throw this first one at you. What sort of defensive adjustments do you think we'll see from Tim Banks moving forward? And this might have a little bit to do with what we were talking about with the injuries. What can you do in some of these positions with some of the guys they have out right now?
Yeah, I think there's probably a schematic play calling sort of angle to answer this question. I'm just not smart enough, but to me, defensive football is, I don't want to say you're kind of at the mercy, but sometimes sometimes the other team just makes the right call in the right moment for what you call, right? I mean, I think philosophically there's probably percentages, and you do a lot of scouting and things like that to say, okay, this team struggles against zone defense. Okay, we don't want to play man against these guys. They have really good receivers. They like to do this in certain situations in certain parts of the field. There's all that information that these coaching staffs have that, they're not just saying, Tim Banks is not out there just saying, it's 3rd and 8, I'm blitzing. Like, there's all these things to sort of take into to account. So, that's sort of hard to answer from that standpoint. I think personnel wise, I would like to see more Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross. I think not to take Joshua Josephs off the field because he's playing pretty well too. I like to see more of those guys. I think you need to play Edwin Spillman a little bit more. And I should note that he and Jeremiah Thielander played the same number of snaps. So, and I think in this game, you've got to play some of those young guys and get them some reps at defensive tackle. That's Isaiah Campbell, Ethan Utley. That's Nathan Robinson, Jamal Wallace. They all need the work to try to continue to get better and get some footing as you go into SEC play.
Sorry, that first question was from Nick One. This one is from Bleed Orange 1899. I want to go back to the fourth down play in the fourth quarter. Do you think calling a timeout there would have been prudent to get our best players on the field, get in the right call, etc.? I know hindsight is 2020, but sure seems like having safety help over the top would have been the better play. What say you, Patrick?
I think yes, to get your best pass rushers on the field, because they didn't have, I don't think Josephs, Herring, or Ross were on the field. Eason, Dominic Bailey, none of those guys were on the field, I don't believe. I think they had Marion Dye. Oh, actually, Ross was on the field. They had Marion Dye, Jamal Wallace, and Nathan Robinson. That's not your best pass rush lineup for that situation. So you also have to take into account the clock and, hey, you may need that timeout later. But I think in that moment, that's such a big play that I think a timeout, again, we're doing all this hindsight. We're doing a lot of hindsighting here. I think that would have been a prudent call to get your best pass rushers on the field, if nothing else.
The flip side to that is it was what, 4th and 6, and they're at the 30-something yard line. I mean, they get a first down there at the 25, and that's just another play and a drive that's not over. So, we're talking about that because that was a touchdown, but the more logical and kind of expected play there would have been a mid-range pass that moves the chains and keeps the drive alive. So why?
And that's what Tennessee was defending, I think. Yeah. Versus, and Kirby Smart talked about this too, that they wanted to go over the top in that moment and try to score there. So I think that worked to their advantage.
Yeah. So Tennessee, I don't think can be faulted too much for not having, safeties back deep, because you're thinking we need to defend the first 10 yards past the line of scrimmage more so than worrying about down the field. So give Georgia credit for a gutsy call. I mean, not many people are throwing that pass in that situation with the game on the line, and give them credit for making the play and just hitting it. UT Rudy asks, what are some timetables on the injured guys not named Sanders and Gibson? So I guess this is more talking about, I guess that Jermod McCoy would be in that category, but David Hobbs, Jackson Moy, any thoughts on those guys, Patrick?
I think it's not going to be this week. We'll see about Mississippi State. I don't think McCoy will be back before October at this point. Probably Hobbs too. I'd probably include him there. Well, he might have a shot next week, but we'll see. And Moy, I think, is probably in the same boat. I know it's not very detailed, but you're not going to see him on Saturday. I feel pretty confident saying that.
Yeah, Moy, I could see Moy or Hobbs or both potentially trying to give it a go next week, but we'll have to just kind of see what their progress is like. It's going to be a pain tolerance thing for Moy, I think, and we'll see where he's at next week, but I don't expect him to play this week. Again, no availability report to go by, so Josh Heupel has not addressed that. But you would think this is a week to sit out anybody who's a close call, because you've got a week here to kind of rest up a little bit and not, you would hope, not be tested too much by UAB before you get back into SEC play. And that trip to Mississippi State is, maybe a little bit tougher game than it looked on the schedule in the offseason. So you definitely don't want to extend anyone this week, but who's not at 100% and then risk their availability for next week. So we'll see how they approach that. But I would not expect those guys to play this week. Anything beyond that seems like it's on the table for those guys. And yeah, I'm with you on Jermod McCoy. I don't think we'll see him before October. And beyond that, it's hard to say for sure. I think there are a couple different factors in that one that could make that a longer term thing, but it also could be a situation where he's back after the open date next month. So we'll see what he decides to do and what how much he pushes, I guess, to get back out there as quickly as possible coming off that injury in the offseason. Multi-part question here from or post, I should say, from B Huff. Number one, could this be Heupel's most explosive offense? We have at least 3 wide receivers who can get vertical, which we haven't had before. I mean, Patrick, they're off to a really good start. It's hard to say that's off the table when Joey Aguilar is throwing for 371 yards and 4 touchdowns against Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, it's on the table for sure. Whether they're averaging 52 points a game right now, he just scored 41 on Georgia, and they're not going to face as many defenses that are as good as the Bulldogs have. So yeah, you've got 3 wide receivers playing really well. Aguilar's playing great. I think he's been a seamless fit. He's playing really confident. I think he's making a lot of good decisions. Again, there are plays that they all would like to have back, but I mean, you score 41 points and 496 yards against Georgia. My 2 cents, you should be winning that game. But I think that performance showed that how they looked in the first 2 weeks was no fluke. And we should give the offensive line some credit too, because I don't think Aguilar has been sacked. I think there's one in the stat sheet, but that was an intentional grounding, which I don't know if it should have been intentional grounding in the first place. So they're protecting him pretty good. I think I think Pro Football Focus has Tennessee allowing 1 quarterback hit all season. So the protection has been really good. And so, 2 big unknowns in the offseason were the offensive line. But, we'd kind of said, Ryan, that they were internally, they felt pretty good about it. That group's, I think, played pretty well, even without David Sanders at this point, it should be said. And so, credit to those guys, and the receivers are playing really well too. And something else Kelsey Pope touched on this week was just how kind of interchangeable and versatile those guys are, to where they're not having to be sort of locked in. Like, they're lining up in different spots. It's not just Braylon Staley's in the slot all the time and Chris Brazzell and Mike Matthews are out wide. Those guys are lining up in different spots and all these different formations that we're seeing from Tennessee and being used in different ways and being used in similar ways, right? We saw, Braylon Staley, a few plays on some crossing routes that came open for nice plays. There was a play in overtime. One of the what ifs I think we did mention earlier was the Mike Matthews play in overtime, where he's probably one broken tackle or a block away from potentially scoring. And I think Aguilar just put too much heat on it. And, Mike Matthews got to make that play. But, they're using these guys sort of in different ways. I think Brazzell's transformation, I think, is a huge deal, because he was a huge question mark going into the season. What would they get from him coming off the injury too in preseason? So that's fully on the table. And it's pretty remarkable to think about, given all the talk in the offseason that, so many new starters, new quarterback, all the stuff. They've obviously put it together really well, really quickly, and just have to sustain it.
The other questions here from B Huff, we'll do these quickly. Biggest concern other than depth/injuries with the team through 3 games that could rear its ugly head and keep us out of the playoff. I'm with you, Patrick. Give the offensive line a lot of credit. Receivers are playing well, so it's nothing on offense for me, believe it or not. I think it's the defense. I'm looking at the secondary, and I think it's related to those the depth and injury questions. After seeing what Georgia did, who's to say other teams might not light up Tennessee the same way in the passing game, depending on when Jermod McCoy is back, depending on whether Ricky Gibson is back at some point. That is not an ideal situation in the secondary. You don't have a lot of depth there either. I could see that being something where another team kind of takes advantage of Tennessee being vulnerable in the secondary. And I'll throw in the safeties there too. They haven't played particularly well at safety, I don't think, or at least didn't Saturday. You don't have a lot of fallback plans there if you're not very effective. So I think the secondary as a whole has got to be a concern for me going forward, just after seeing what Georgia did.
I would agree, and I would throw in not the defensive line, but defensive tackle. I mean, Bryson Easton and Dominic Bailey are warriors, and they're dudes, but 60 snaps a game in SEC play, that's going to take its toll over the course of the season.
No doubt. And then number 3 for this post, biggest opportunity for a bad loss/trap game. Are we coming up on it? Is it Mississippi State? What do you think, Patrick? I don't think you can call Oklahoma a trap game, so got to go some other direction for that one.
I would say probably either Mississippi State or Arkansas, just because Arkansas is one of those teams that, like, you just never know, right? They might come out and, light the world on fire. They could come out and stink up the place. They had Ole Miss on the ropes in Oxford, and so they play a lot of close games. It was a close game last season, and Taylor Green would scare the ever-living bejesus out of me if I was Tennessee with the state of my defense. But I'd probably go Mississippi State. That place is going to be pretty amped up. At least they've avoided a night game there.
I'm going to go a different direction. I'm tempted to say Vanderbilt just because they're playing so well right now, but I'm going to say Kentucky. Tennessee's had its bugaboos on the road. They're not a great road team typically under Josh Heupel, and it's a trap game a little bit between Alabama and Oklahoma on the schedule. If Kentucky can get anything going offensively, which that's a big if for where that program has been, that's
see been a big if for like 6 years, maybe longer.
So if they can get something going with the young quarterback there, maybe that's a game where Tennessee, doesn't play its best or something, and that one gets interesting. So I'll say Kentucky, just because that's one not a lot of people are looking at as a dangerous one, and it is kind of sandwiched in a tricky spot on the schedule between 2 really big games for this team. UT Rudy asks, are there any players that are beginning to emerge in practice that could begin to see snaps or more snaps as the season continues to progress? Patrick, I'm looking at the defensive line for one. Just where's their opportunity? That seems like one where someone like an Isaiah Campbell, maybe. I'm not sure there's anyone who I would say has earned more snaps, but someone like that, I think there's still an opportunity for them to earn their way onto the field, or maybe at linebacker Jaden Harmon, someone like that we've already seen a little bit.
I would have gone Harmon because I give Willie Minch some credit for being honest. He's like, I should have played him more. I should have played him, if nothing, to give Arion Carter a bit of a blow. And so, Harmon's a guy that I would say that they want to get more involved just based on that. And he played against Syracuse in the second half, and you knew when he was on the field, he closed quickly to some plays and didn't look out of place for a guy that was a freshman playing his first college game after not getting a spring because he was sidelined with a shoulder surgery.
I'm interested in seeing if we see a little more of Jack Van Dorselaer at some point too. He got in there for a play or two after Ethan Davis got banged up, but he's a freshman tight end who could maybe help them in some spots this year. We had a joking question from UT Rudy asking when Theo Vaughn is taking Pavia's mom out. We'll keep on rolling. We'll go to Kyle Matheny, who asks, do you think interest in recruiting has waned significantly due to the portal? Has interest in the portal waned since it first showed up? I think the interest in recruiting, it depends on who you are. Some people are still just as into recruiting as they always were, but I think there are some people who've been affected by that. And yeah, it's twofold. I think it's NIL being discouraged by how recruiting battles kind of drag on, or can be, can just turn on a dime with one school coming in with a big offer or something like that. And it's players being able to enter the portal after one season. It's, having to worry about a Mike Matthews or a Ricky Gibson or whoever it might be entering the portal, to where even when you get good players, it's sometimes hard to keep them. So yeah, I think there are some people who have been affected. Certainly not everyone, but a lot of people I think do view recruiting a little bit differently, because it's so year to year now for a lot of fans, and I think that has to affect the way some people are looking at it. Has interest in the portal waned since it first showed up? I wouldn't say so, Patrick. Would you?
No, I think probably there's maybe there's an overemphasis on it, because again, the assumption remains that everybody you get there is an upgrade, and I don't know that that's the case. And sometimes it may not seem like it in the moment, but there's something to be said for paying the guys you want to keep that you believe in versus going out and overpaying for somebody in the portal. So that I think it's maybe been an overemphasis on it. And I'm just talking from a Tennessee standpoint, because they're a little different from a lot of teams who are going heavier in the portal, whereas Tennessee is being more selective in choosing to emphasize high school recruiting, keeping those guys and developing them. And now I think we're, with this particular team, and we're seeing Tennessee sort of play, a lot of these guys that they've recruited and have in some cases had to try to keep, or had to make efforts to keep.
We'll go rapid fire on these three questions from Mississippi Vol. Based off this Saturday's performance, do you have any new thoughts on an over/under for 9.5 wins? I'm still leaning toward. I'm still at 9 wins, but I do think there's still a pretty good chance of the over, a realistic chance to me. So not much has changed for me, but I do still think this team is a 9 or 10 win team. Patrick, you have any different thoughts? You might be not quite as high on that win total as me.
Well, if they could take what they did to Georgia and bottle it every week, then
sure.
That's a playoff team easily, but that's just so hard to do in college football. And it's hard to trust them to do it. They still got to go to Alabama. They still got to go to Florida. There's some games that looked easier a few weeks ago than they are now. And
Oklahoma looks pretty tough.
Some games that, that will change even between now and when they play them, just because you don't know how a season's going to go. So, if they look like a 10-11 win team against Georgia, but are they going to be able to replicate that every week in some of these big games? That's the big question.
Also, besides getting some guys healthy and tackling better in space, is there anything this defense can do to improve over the course of this season? And then he also asked, how much would you bet that Coach Hype says we have to get some things, quote, cleaned up in his halftime interview this weekend? I'd say that one's a minus 150 or so on the money line. Patrick, what do you think about getting the defense to improve aside from getting guys healthy and tackling better in space?
I think it's big plays in the pass game. I think they've got to figure out a way to shore those up. I don't know if that's, try to keep everything in front of you kind of thing, kind of schemes. You don't want to go totally conservative, but they've got to find a way to limit. I talked about UAB's giving up a bunch of big plays. I think Tennessee's actually given up one more pass play of 20 plus yards than UAB has. Now UAB has given up some huge plays, but that was an interesting stat that they've given up so many big pass plays already. They certainly got to shore that up, and that's not just the secondary, but I do think the secondary play is where maybe the most improvement needs to be made.
Yeah, I'd maybe be looking for more opportunities to get a couple of those edge rushers out there together, because I think that's the best thing Tennessee has going for it on defense. I'd be trying to get Joshua Joseph and Caleb Herring, or Joshua Joseph and Jordan Ross, that combination out there, aside from just third downs or just long yardage situations where you can just kind of pin your ears back and go after the quarterback. But that's just me. Call your shot before Tuesday's announcement, and that has been confirmed as we speak, that They will be announcing the 3 permanent opponents for each SEC team on Tuesday. So who will Tennessee's 3 permanent opponents be? Nick 1 would like to know, Patrick.
Well, it should be Vanderbilt, Alabama, and Kentucky.
But everybody's going to say that's too easy.
Well, if you're going to value what you say you're going to value as a league, then those are, 3 rivals for Tennessee.
Because of that, though, because it's not as easy. I think the people who are promoting fairness, who are worried about Alabama having Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU versus Tennessee potentially having Tennessee or Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky, I think it's going to be Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Florida. If I had to guess, I think those end up being the 3.
Yeah, I would say it should be those 3. I don't think it will be, though, because there will be enough pissing and moaning from everybody else for fairness. But if you're from Kentucky's standpoint, Tennessee is like their biggest game. Like that's their biggest rivalry, isn't it? So how can you deny them that? You're obviously not going to turn down Vanderbilt's in-state rival, and then the third Saturday in October is going to continue to live on through all of these changes as it should. So, but yeah, it's going to be that's what the 3 that should be. Tennessee has played those 3 teams over 100 times. They've not played anybody else more than 60 something. And that's Ole Miss, I think. I would say it should be those 3. But like you said, Ryan, I think enough of a stink will be raised by others that it won't be.
It'll be Alabama and Vanderbilt. I feel pretty confident in those 2. Just a matter of who that 3rd is. Some people have thrown out South Carolina. There could be a bit of a surprise there. I think it'll be someone from the SEC East, that old division. But exactly who it is, we'll see. It could be Kentucky, it could be Florida, it could be South Carolina. But yeah, I'm with you, Patrick. If Kentucky doesn't have Tennessee as a rival, they don't have a rival in that.
What are we doing? Right? Yeah.
So I don't know if we're preserving rivalries. That a team that's played more than 100 times, a team that you played more than 100 times should probably be on your schedule. And finally, from M10 Vol, if you had to make a guess, above 50% or below 50% chance we ever see Jermod McCoy in a Tennessee uniform again, give me the over on that one, Patrick. What do you think?
I'm 60-40 at this point.
Okay.
Maybe 65-35.
Okay. So you're going pretty realistic chance he sits out the whole year. All right, that's interesting.
Wait. Well, let's hold on. Let's make sure I heard the question right.
Over or under 50% that we ever see Jermod McCoy in a Tennessee uniform again?
You said over, right?
Yeah.
What would your over be?
It would be. I'd go 75-25 probably at this point. I think pretty good chance that he's back.
Maybe I'm just naturally skeptical, right?
Just a matter of whether it's October or November, but I think there's a good chance he'll play.
I do think he will be back, but I'm just maybe hedging a little bit more than you.
That's fair. No, it's at this point. I think anything's on the table. I can't rule out that he sits out the whole year, but yeah, right now I would still lean toward him likely playing at some point. It just might not be. We'll see. It might not be as soon as people expect or hope, but either way, Tennessee certainly could use him back pretty soon with the way that secondary obviously got lit up a little bit against Georgia. They certainly miss him with the injuries they've had elsewhere in the defense. So, Patrick, we covered quite a bit of ground here. Got to wrap things up for this week. But for Patrick Brown, I'm Ryan Callahan. Thanks for all your questions. We'll talk to you guys on Saturday with another post-game edition of the GoVols247 Podcast. Until then, hope you guys enjoy another home game Saturday at Neyland Stadium. We'll talk to you guys here in just a couple days.